So welcome and good afternoon, everyone. Jenny and I would like to thank you for joining us for CX Growing Pains. During our session, we want to take you through some of the obstacles and lessons that we hope will keep you from going through the same pain that we have over the past 3 years. I'm Alistair Beffin, the head of customer experience at Definitive. I've been part of the team now for just over 3 years. And prior to that, have been in a multitude of customer-facing roles, but over the past decade, really living in breathing customer success/experience.
And my name is Jenny. I've been with Definitive for about 5 years now, started working at more of a support type role and moved my way up to be a senior CSM and team lead before establishing what's now our sales and service operations team. We really focus on day-to-day operations, system management, and process improvement.
Well, before jumping in, a little bit about Definitive Healthcare. We were founded in 2011 by our CEO, Jason Krantz. And for those of you that might not know us, we are a sales and marketing data analytics provider for any company that sells into healthcare. So we have a large variety of customers from big pharma and med device to those companies that sell flooring into healthcare. So just quickly talk about our 3 main topics for today. The first is around managing expectations. As everyone is running at 100 miles an hour, this is really important. We found that we were not clearly communicating to the team what we were expecting from them, both from a KPI and process standpoint. So we had to make some adjustments to account for this. The second topic will be communicating those updates, but making sure that it's not only happening at the right time, but that the right people are getting the information. We found that at the executive team level, we were all on the same page, but we ended up with games of telephone happening within the departments, and that things really needed to be resolved to make sure that we were all working cohesively. And finally, we want to talk about how we did all of this while keeping up with a business that was growing at 40 to 50% every year. Just a sneak peek, you need to make sure that everything is scalable. We certainly needed to move out from doing a number of things manually into a more automated methodology, whether that was through adding to our technology stack or just really streamlining our processes. Jenny is now going to kick us off with our first topic.
Thanks, Alistair. And so, Alistair, as he first mentioned, our first topic is going into managing expectations in a fast-paced and ever-changing environment. And honestly, for the lesson learned here is really that any change that's coming, it's really to be sure to create clarity on the why. So first, our challenge. Number 1 is a lack of clarity on the role. And for some background, I mentioned in the first couple of years at Definitive, what's now our CX team, our customer experience team, it actually started off as a small group of people that operated at more of that support type capacity. So really what that meant was we were really reactive. We did technically own accounts, but they were huge books. So we probably averaged around 130 accounts per person, and we really only had time for that transactional and surface level interactions. So as we've grown, we've introduced a few new teams to help take some of that day-to-day transactional lift off of our CSMs so they can really focus on those more strategic engagements. So this really means a huge adjustment to the expectations on what a CSM did versus a support, training, data integration, or an operations person. So really our first approach here was creating a division of labor. And this was really, came down to reestablishing where that line is drawn across the roles in terms of customer interactions with roles and responsibility documents across all teams. So figuring out who should follow up when this happens or who should do what when that happens. The second part of this is really creating clear career paths. So with our team, another component of the growth was really bringing in team members who came with customer success experience. So different levels and, in addition to the different types of roles too. And for so many of our team at the time, customer success was an extremely new concept. And we only really knew about it when Alistair came on board and rebranded us officially as CSMs. So people were unclear on the expectations on the role and what the next steps were for their career trajectory. So really to sort of approach this challenge, the tools that helped us was one, documentation. And this will not be the first time or the last time that you hear us bring up documentation, because it's really that important to everything that you do. The second piece that I want to point out on documentation is the collaboration between our CS organization, or specifically our management, to come to that mutual understanding on what each role was and the expectations there. So we really focused on updating our job descriptions, our exercises, our evaluation forms through that recruiting and interviewing process. But we did create new documents too. So one, we created a new role profile, which really outlined core responsibilities, key challenges, experience, key traits for someone in that role, or in each role too. And we also created an internal evaluation form. So for someone who's actually looking to move into that role, they would fill out this form and their manager will fill out this form. And then they come together to really have a discussion on where they are hitting the mark, but where they could also use a little more practice to get them in that position for a promotion. The second tool here was a full day CS leadership offsite where we were locked in a conference room to revamp our KPIs. And this really came down to, realizing that our CSMs were actually struggling a bit to get focused. And sure, you can argue that it's a prioritization or time management issue. And that's what we thought it was at first, until we realized that it really wasn't. And honestly, just thinking back, we know how important and critical a CSM's role is in the success of our customers. And as we continue to iterate and improve on our overall engagement strategy, it's super easy to come up with new ways to look at data, new patterns and such, which ultimately result in more metrics to focus on. So it really came to a point when we realized that our CSMs have 10 to 15 KPIs that they were focusing on. And that doesn't even include the specific metrics within them. So that certainly contributed to the overall confusion and on what it meant to be a CSM. So after that long day, that long meeting, we came out with 4 clear and specific KPIs for our CSMs to focus on. Our second challenge here is just the general company mindset shift from new logo to retention business. So with this shift in company mindset, as an organization, we are really doubling down on the resources from other teams even to help support our side of the organization and bringing our customers to renewal. And, this came out in a few different areas. So we needed to, again, change expectations. So as our renewable business was growing and expanding, we had a need to create a new role or a new team. And this was our account executive team, where they're really focused on, the client sales. So focused on upsell, cross-sell, and renewals. And we really approach this with the focus and thought of having a one-to-one partnership on every account, where a CSM and an account executive would work together to support them. So this is really all about expectations on learning how to coexist with someone who may actually have some competing priorities, because what's best for the customer may not necessarily help them hit quota. And this resulted in more cross-departmental collaboration. So we needed to keep iterating on the expectations of the role and work to create more of these roles and responsibility documents for every pairing. So our CSMs and our account executives, our CSMs and our professional services team, our CSMs and our AEs and our operations team. So definitely mapping out all of those roles and responsibilities help create that clarity. But our major tool here to help us navigate through all of that is making the team a part of the process and the solution, especially when creating these roles and responsibilities documents. Is extremely helpful to get their input. So we ended up creating work groups for people who were interested in getting involved in establishing what these guidelines looked like. And the discussions were actually facilitated by a member of AM leadership. And out of it, we created more clear guidance on how to coexist and how to better manage the handoff between these internal teams. And our last challenge for this topic is really reactive to a data-driven proactive. So this speaks more of that shift towards making more educated guesses on what we needed to do next to become a better CS team, rather than throwing something up against the wall and hoping that it sticks, which was our go-to, admittedly. So, with this, our solution kind of falls under fortune telling, but doing it in a way that makes sense. So we needed to, one, anticipate the needs of the business and also be a little more forward thinking. So the first item on anticipation is really understanding the current customer patterns and behaviors, because especially when customers aren't behaving positively, there is a reason why, and we need to get to a full understanding of that so we can act accordingly. The next is be forward thinking. So, is there some mitigation we can really apply here on some of the upcoming changes by planning, doing a little more planning. And really, this was the shift between before we were operating at 30-day intervals. So really just trying to figure out what the next 30 days look like. And now we are definitely more in the headspace of what does the next 12 to 24 months look like. So really focusing on that forward thinking aspect. And what helped us really navigate through forward thinking and the anticipation is enhanced analytics and reporting. So looking at historical trends, patterns, getting a better understanding of our customers and our overall business. So this is actually one of the responsibilities of our operations team, is to run reports, work within our team or with members of our leadership organization to evaluate what's happening. We'll also manage some projects based on our findings and just improve overall implementation. But Alistair, anything to add on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I guess the one thing that I will add here is, I cannot stress enough how important it is to having a operations team that supports the customer experience group. We would not have been able to make all of the changes that we've made over the past 3 years, and frankly, the last 18 months, which we've done a lot without that team. Again, if they're not on your radar for hiring, that they should absolutely be. So our next topic here is talking about how what we needed to do to find solutions for our communications. And we certainly found that we had several communication gaps between leadership and the members of our team. Frankly, this was just a function of the company growing so quickly and us needing to work through how and when information needed to make its way down. So really two solutions here. One was, understanding what the impact to the team was and how it was affecting their day-to-day. Until we fully understood it, we couldn't really affect change. The second was making sure that we had a strategy for everything that we were communicating. There were definitely times where we would just come up with a process on the fly and then all of a sudden communicate it down without fully understanding, again, the impact to the team, but also making sure that we were communicating it correctly. In discussions with the team and my own peers, we felt that it would be a good idea to put in a management layer between myself and the individual contributors on the team, so that we could really help facilitate those gaps in communication. And we also had, up to that point, we'd only had player coaches. I had put in team leads onto the team because, frankly, our team was growing so quickly, I could not do one-on-ones with everybody. And so we needed to make sure that we had some more tenured folks there. And then the second piece was around this single source of truth. We definitely had information in all sorts of areas across our network, on individuals' computers, et cetera, et cetera. And we really needed to consolidate those. And we're now leveraging Seismic as our single source of truth. The second challenge that we faced was the blurred line between leadership and individual contributors. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned, we'd had a player coach model. And so helping people understand what information needed to stay confidential and at a leadership level and not really be discussed with, your friends on the team because you're now a leader. And so, we had two solutions here. And we found that we really needed to control the information that was flowing into the team, but we also needed to make sure that our newly promoted leaders understood that there was information that couldn't be shared until it was ready to be discussed. And that's just a learning mechanism that all of us as leaders have gone through in our careers. And so we needed to make sure that everybody understood what that meant. So, again, two tools here. At that management layer, we realized that, it was great that we were promoting. I have a number of great leaders on my team that were promoted directly out of the team, and they've been great. But we also wanted to make sure that we brought in some more experienced folks other than myself that could really help these newly promoted folks understand what it was that it meant to be confidential and how to really be leaders. The other piece was making sure that they got the right amount of training. We as a company, and I think a lot of you can relate to this, as startup companies, we really want to promote our best and brightest on our team and really show them career path. But what we fail to do is give them the right training to do that new job. You will always hear me say, the most difficult job that any person will ever have is the first time that they become an inline manager. They now need to manage their individual contributors, and they need to learn how to manage up. Once you've sort of moved out of inline management into sort of my roles or into director role, you sort of get that layer between you and the team. So we had to make sure that we gave them the right amount of training, and not just the right amount, but the right training so they could do their jobs effectively. The third and final challenge that we faced was, making sure that the right hand knew what the left hand was doing. I am sure that everyone has had that experience where, department heads, we walk away from a meeting with each other, we think that we're on the same page, and we communicate to our individual teams, and then the individual teams start talking to each other, and we realize, oh, wait a minute, we missed a few things, or we weren't quite as aligned as we had thought we were. So, our solution here was really, it was pretty simple. We really wanted to make sure that our middle management within our teams felt empowered to collaborate with one another, but also to question the department heads. I always want my leadership team to push me and push my thoughts, and make sure that the decisions that we're making, while they might be best for the business, maybe they're not quite the right decisions for the team. And so then let's collaborate both at the leadership level, at our department level, but then across the other functions of the company. So the tools that we put in place, middle management is now meeting much more frequently. They're meeting at least on a weekly basis, sometimes more often than that, depending on what's going on. And then the second piece is to make sure that we documented and established clear processes and workflows across the functions. This was something that we historically hadn't done at all. And when we hadn't done it very well. So, Jenny can certainly speak to the impact of this, right, Jenny?
Absolutely. And, being a part of those conversations and just the collaboration with those organizations really created a great working relationship between the teams. You really get a great appreciation for what they do, because from a customer success perspective, or even the professional services side as the example, we're not fully aware on their day-to-day. So I think that overall was just a really great exercise to have. And for our final topic, just generally keeping up with the business. And honestly, the only way to do that is to make it scalable. So for our first challenge within just generally keeping up with the business is trying to figure out what to tackle first. And based on all of the upcoming initiatives and projects and good ideas that you hear, we needed to figure out what to prioritize and what we can start executing on and with that, we really approach this in a couple ways. So one was this new impacting the business meeting. So this was really a collaboration of our CS leadership and our senior CSM team members to take stock of what could be done to improve what we're doing. So in that way, we were definitely able to get the team involved as well. Also, just more collaboration with our ELT, our executive leadership team as well. So Alistair was having these monthly meetings with all members of the ELT, really to get that clear understanding of the general direction of our business and how we can adapt in that way too. And lastly here, and there's so much to be done that we really needed to empower the team so they could also take on some projects and initiatives to really keep things moving forward. So what helped us navigate, all of these ideas and projects and such was first figuring out how to prioritize again. So we really used a prioritization matrix. So based on everything that was on our massive to-do list, we indicated for each item whether it had a high or low impact or value, and then whether or not it had a high or low effort. So there you kind of figure out, what's the biggest bang for our buck, what might take a little longer, but will be really, really helpful for the team. Second, we have our gap analysis. So this was another exercise to help us get a sense of what processes and documentation for the workflows we had in place, or, even better, what was missing. And then lastly, here is a OneNote. So this is really a centralized place to keep track of meeting minutes, follow-ups, and to stay organized on what needed to be addressed, particularly with our group of managers as well. Our second challenge is living in the Stone Ages, and this is exactly what it sounds like. Most of what we were doing, it was actually either done manually, or at least it was done in the way that it had always been done. So really to tackle this, we first needed to identify our inefficiencies. So what were we currently doing that was slowing us down? What were the bottlenecks? And two, is there actually a good reason why we were doing it this way? And, it's super important to note that it's really easy to stick to the status quo, but remember, just because that's how it's always been done doesn't mean that's how it should be done. So, after considering those things, it turns out that most of our inefficiencies could actually be scaled and issues could be solved with new tools that are already out there. So, and just to name a few here, Salesforce. Before, we were really using a homegrown CRM that our CEO had created through Microsoft Access. And even though it was really hard to pry his hands off of his baby, it's certainly needed, and we are definitely better for it. Second is Churn Zero. So, Salesforce is a great tool and all, but it's right in the name. Sales. And we really needed a platform specific to customer success that would help our CSMs get that level of visibility needed so they can really optimize the way that they're managing their customers. And Seismic, and Alistair's touched up upon this in his section previously, but before we were using a really extremely messy network folder to house all of our documentation. And honestly, we had 3 consecutive summer interns try to clean this up as their summer project. And we're still not there. But, shifting things over to Seismic helped allow for better documentation management and overall organization of our resources. And Zendesk here, wrapping up on the tools. So previously, we were using a simple listserv to actually field all support emails and requests. So what this means is that every CSM was getting every support email, and everyone had to look it up in our homegrown CRM to really see who even owned the account before doing something about it. So Zendesk support ticketing was certainly a help there. And this also gave us the visibility to understand where our team is spending most of their time and what additional customer resources are needed. And for the final challenge, it's just plain and simple, change is hard. And it just really comes down to change management. None of us are experts, and everyone is constantly learning and trying to be better on how to manage the change and really understanding the impact it has on ourselves and especially our teams. So our solution to, change management here is, one, just creating a clear understanding of the benefits for our team. So what is the ROI for them? And helping them understand that, the end goal is always to try and make their lives easier. And even though it might take some effort to get there, it's the right thing to do and will be better for it once people start getting used to the change. And really just helping them understand the benefits will help them, buy in more to the change and just be more receptive to it overall. And secondly, and probably one of the most important, is really just acknowledgement and empathy from leadership. So when introducing a change, really showing an understanding up front that, yeah, we are asking you guys to change something in your day-to-day. And really, they say that change in the work environment, it can be just as stressful as a major change in your life, in your personal life. So, really acknowledging and being empathetic to the fact that we are changing your mindset, we are changing your daily workflows, and help them understand that we are a team. And while you guys are the ones that have to live with that change, we're going to do whatever it takes to make that process easier for you. And really how we were able to help alleviate some of that stress with the change really came from creating more forums for feedback. So emphasizing the importance of VOE, or voice of the employee, by giving teams a platform to be transparent. So this came in the form of Q&A sessions, team meetings, specifically with the individual managers and their smaller teams, to figure out what's working and what's not working, more importantly. Also, an emphasis on training. So just providing additional resources to optimize that adoption, and really acknowledging that people learn at different speeds and also in different ways. So be accommodating to that and give them options on how they can learn. So clear documentation for the readers, videos for the visual learners, practice activities for those hands-on folks as well. And again, documentation, just using seismic documentation as our one source of truth for guidelines, instructions, resources. This is their Bible, and we are very, very adamant about that as well. So today, wrapping up, we really talked about all sorts of change throughout various points in our journey over the past few years. So here is a snapshot of where we were back in 2017 versus where we are now in 2020. And as you can see, just clients and employees, we have really grown exponentially in that time, and not just Definitive as a whole, but there was extreme growth within our CX organization as well. And really where we saw a lot of that change was through our general organizational structure. And what started as, in 2017 as a group of CSMs, some team leads, and an Alistair, we really have grown into an award-winning customer experience team, which now includes customer success, support, training, onboarding, data integration, and our operations team as well. And finally here, the big piece of it is really growing out our technology stack. Back then, we only had Microsoft Access and Outlook, and now we have implemented the best of breed resources. So Salesforce, TurnZero, Zendesk. But yeah, as you can see, everything on this slide really amounts to so much change. And in the shift from 2017 as a fast-paced team that was constantly iterating and changing, we are certainly much closer in 2020 to becoming the more strategic and forward-thinking team that we want to continue growing into. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alistair for final thoughts and to wrap this up.
If you walk away, again, if you only walk away with three things, these would be it, right? Number one, the only thing that you can count on is that change is always going to happen. Every team needs to continue to evolve. And if you don't, then you get stuck doing things that don't make sense for your customers. And you really need to continue to change as a team. The second is that you need to be transparent with your team and leadership as best you can. If everyone is reading from the same hymnal, then you will have an experience that's less adverse to change. Then people will understand, and we'll bring them along with the solution. But they have to be read in. They have to understand what's happening. The third and final, of course, is the most important, and that is that failure is going to happen no matter how well you prepare. I don't think that there's anyone here that you can say that everything they've tried worked out just the way that you thought it would. But we have to learn from our mistakes and try to do better next time. So with that, thank you everyone for joining us. We've left our contact information up, and please feel free to reach out to us at any point, whether it be via email or through LinkedIn. And we will now open things up for Q&A. And I see that we already have a couple of questions to go with. Let's jump in and answer a couple of these questions, Jenny.
Yes, thank you everyone for sticking around, especially through that. But I think we're ready to kick through some of these questions. So first question, when we created a division of labor on our team, what were some of the roles we introduced? Great question. So there was another question in there that popped up about what we were before we rebranded. So I think that kind of plays into the answer here, but we were actually account managers by title, but we were in that support type function. So very reactive. We actually had a separate team handling renewals. So we were just account managers by title, but really when we had switched over to the CSMs, we still had similar functions, but then we realized, as a CSM, we wanted them to really focus on more of that strategic engagement, really spend more time researching their customers, figuring out what they need, and being proactive in that way. So with our product, it's actually a pretty complex product. We field a ton of questions. We also need to do training on the platform, more than one. So it's not just a set implementation early on. It's really throughout the entire customer journey. We're continually educating them on new things that are happening and so on. So to answer the question, we introduced a support team to really field a lot of, be our first line of defense in answering those questions. We also introduced a training team to handle some of those sort of one-off trainings, also to support some of our larger enterprise rollouts and work with some of our senior CSMs on those. We also introduced a data integration team, more specifically to support some of the more technical aspects where we can integrate our data into a customer system. So having more technical people to focus on driving value in that way was really awesome to add. And then also the creation of our operations team. Alistair, did I miss any?
Nope, I think you hit them all, actually.
Quite a group. But moving on to the next question, I know we started a little late. So I've asked about a CS operations, hiring for a CS ops role, and my manager's response was that getting a CSM platform was supposed to help us do more with less people. So any thoughts on how to counter his argument? I think, he makes a great point, right? A CS platform will really help CSMs do a lot of the work that they need, or not do a lot of the work, but it'll really, especially in the outreach that they their customers. The one thing that I will say is that for us anyways, there was a ton of internal things that we needed to do. So it kind of comes down to what you and your manager expect out of a CSM, right? Do you want them to be sort of project-based and sort of work on improving the business on the back end and really focus on making changes and improvements that way? Or do you really want them to focus on our customers? It's right in their title, right? So for us, my team and what we do is a lot of day-to-day operations on the back end to take some of that administrative stuff to a certain level off of the CSM's plate. Alistair, I don't know if there's anything that you may have gone to leadership about in introducing the team.
Yeah, so I think, I think that the other piece to this is having someone on your team who really sees this as their role and their career path. So I was super lucky. Jenny really came to me and said, you know what, I love being a CSM, but you know what I love even more is really understanding process and making it efficient. And so she went out, she built the role, and then presented with myself to our CEO and our chief product officer to really pitch the role. And because of all the great work that Jenny had already done as a CSM, we were really, really fortunate that we had her take the lead on our team.
Thanks, Alistair. And I think, there was another comment around, where you can find this person. And I will say, having been a CSM, but also specifically at Definitive, has really helped just figure out exactly what we need, right? I know the role, I know our customers, I know what CSM has been through. So wanting to make their role easier has definitely helped having that background.
Yeah. So I know we unfortunately we only have about 15 seconds left. There were lots of great questions. Please ping us offline, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. Again, thank you so much for joining, and I hope everybody enjoys the closing remarks.
Thanks, everyone.